Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Get Into It with Gila. I'm Gila Glassberg, your host, registered dietitian and intuitive eating counselor. And today I have on Rachel Lebowitz. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Gila.
How are
It's
you?
good. It's so good to be on here again.
I'm so happy to have you on. Such a cool topic that we're going to be covering today. First, I'm just going to introduce you. You're an EOS, help me out here, EOS
Implementer.
implementer, and you're working with CEOs to help them understand codependency or work through it.
Correct. To work through it. So I am an EOS implementer. I'm a codependence recovery coach, and that is all. It ties all together. It's, my personal past plus my journey plus my business journey that led me to my latest venture, which is in helping people that are in supportive roles, people that are supporting visionaries, mostly entrepreneurs. So, COOs are a big one. I did create a platform called Spouses of Visionaries and the Visionary Spouse Forum. And I'm working with another coach. She's leading the project, and we're helping spouses because they're also in that relationship. Visionaries are high level entrepreneurs that are just like big personalities, and it's very easy to fall into a codependent relationship with a visionary. It's interesting to see how people that have a codependent history tend to recreate their past in their relationships. So either at work or at home, which led me, I was doing a lot of my own work around codependence, healing from my own codependency, which led me to lately realize the correlation between codependency and the way we eat. And that's why I'm here today. I think this is super important information, and I want to share it with your viewer base.
Okay, I'm so excited. Can you explain what codependence is before we go on? Like, how would you define it?
Sure. So codependent is believing that something outside of yourself is going to make you feel whole and better. So it's either if I am going to please that person enough, they will like me.
Hmm.
And then sometimes it turns into overt, where it becomes, I need that person to make me feel whole. So I'm going to control them. So like that, I make sure that they stay where they are so that I can be okay. It's looking for our safety outside of ourselves. And we can control people, places, and things. And one of the things that we can try to control is our food. And that codependency on food is if I behave around food a certain way, if I control food a certain way, if I eat a certain way, I will be okay. So that's where the interrelationship between codependency and food exists. I can go into it a little bit more, and I can show you a slide if this is where you start.
I want to actually start with like your journey to how you got here. Like what, if you don't mind sharing, what has been your, I know you shared this on the other podcast, but maybe just briefly, what has been your relationship with food until now and how did you get here?
Sure. So my relationship with food has been pretty distorted. I come from a big family, and somehow at the age of 6, I was sent to a nutritionist and was given this belief that I am overweight. And then I vividly remember the nutritionist saying that when I'll reach 200, I'll get diabetes or I might die. Like I was scared at a very young age about being fat. And when I look back at pictures now from when I was younger, I wasn't even fat. I was chubby, I was cute, I was beautiful, but I did not see that inside of myself until very recently. Later on, I battled a lot. Like when I look back, I realized that I really I really had distorted eating, and I really did a lot of unhealthy things, using diuretics, ways of restricting myself, diet pills. Later did surgery, and I never understood why I didn't feel okay in my body. Understanding that it came from trauma response. Um, a lot of growing up in a very chaotic environment, big household, a lot of trauma was and food was, I guess, how I related to the world and how I felt in control. So, rejecting myself by rejecting food, telling myself I don't deserve it, not good enough. There's a lot of stages of that. And then there was a lot of stages of secretly eating, binging, being, there's a lot of talk in my brain of you can't have that, not good enough, it's not for you. And it's some of them is like self-talk that I have reinforced other people's messages.
Right.
And some of these messages were given to me from the people in my childhood and all that. So it's yeah, I've had a very tense relationship with food. So after doing sleeve surgery 2015, believing like I was like, okay, I don't like I have no control over this. I was never good at dieting. Like I talk to people, some people are able to follow diets. I was never ever good at dieting. I'm not a follower. I'm a rebel. So if you tell me I need to do something, I will do the opposite. And then so 2015, I believe, December 2015, I decided I'm going to do sleeve surgery. I had a 7-month-old, really bad idea. Um, then I told myself that even though it doesn't have lasting effect, I want to taste what skinny feels like. I don't care. I want to do it. When I look back at pictures of when I was at my skinniest and I look at myself, I am like a shadow of myself. I'm a skeleton. I am unhappy. I'm running away from myself. It's so painful to look at that girl and realize that everything that I was searching for was not there. Um, my I told myself I'm not gonna be aesthetic. I went into like obsessively exercising, obsessively measuring, weighing food, really distorted ways of eating. And then suddenly I found myself back at my pre-surgery weight. The crazy part is that if I measure how much food I eat right now, I'm really under eating. I barely make it to 1,000, 1,200 calories a day and I gained weight anyways. And so I started, working with you intuitive eating. That was very helpful. Being able to tap into my hunger, fullness cues, also taking away the stigmas around food,
Right.
really being able to tell myself that like not to eat food judgmentally to a big degree. And
Yeah.
then there was still left that part that was like, I don't get it. Like, how did I gain back 60 pounds when I watch people around me eat way, way more and I cannot eat? I literally get super nauseous. I have a lot of stomach pain. So I went and I tested myself. I went to doctors, tried figuring out maybe something's wrong with me. Maybe I have a bug. Everything like physically was fine. Um, when I look around the people around me and they eat more, and I think back pre-sleeve surgery, I just as much had the nausea. I just as much didn't eat a lot. I really don't. I did not. My portion changes weren't that different, and it really didn't explain what's going on. Recently, I deep dived into codependence and trauma, and I realized that fear and shame live in the stomach. And I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder that I had no idea about. So that is living in my stomach. So whenever I feel fear, anxiety, shame, I shut down and I don't eat because my stomach goes into nausea. It goes in, it's a protective response. It's my freeze that I fall into where I can't I disassociate. I go into my body. I can't eat. So that's that when I finally started understanding that and the correlation between codependency and the way I eat, I'm able to unfreeze myself and actually talk myself through these things and get myself into a place where I can have better, healthier eating habits. So yeah, that's where I am right now. And what's fascinating is that um when I up my calories, I know that our goal is not weight loss, but two crazy things happened. Number one is when I up my calories, I feel way better. I have more energy. My clothes fit better. I haven't been on a scale for years. So I can't tell you weight wise, but I could tell you that I feel myself and it's fascinating to me. And whenever I start getting fear, like I've recognized very interesting patterns. Like I don't eat like a whole week and then Thursday I start eating. Like it's this weird unfreeze that happens over the weekend. And I realize that when I eat, And sometimes I can get into a panic state because I started eating. And I have to tell myself that it's good for me and it's fine. And I just have to regulate myself to know my hunger and fullness cues because Shabbos is a social event. And I do realize I go into this uncontrolled moment and I can go into what people would call binge, but I realize that my binge is another person's regular eating. And
Right.
what people and the hardest part for me is, wow, Gila, I did not realize this is all going there, but I'm so happy it
Go
is.
for it.
Um, the hardest part for me is when people see me, they see a very overweight person, and they would never ever dream that I live on 1,000 calories a day, max 1,200, maybe make it to like 1,600. How much calories does a person have to eat a day to live?
Well, it depends
A
on
girl.
well, it depends on their weight, their height, their exercise level,
Right.
but a good range is around 2,000 calories.
Yeah, I most days don't reach 2,000 calories. And to feel the judgment of the world when I eat in this body, and for people to have no idea that I almost died starving myself. And we'll never forget that moment sitting in my kitchen and realizing just finished building this beautiful house and having a beautiful family, having an amazing husband. And I looked at myself and I said, I'm starving myself. I am dying inside. I need to go get help. And that's when I reached out and met an eating disorder specialist. And that's when I put all this together and she helped me see how it relates to my codependency. And that the hardest part is knowing that others will never like we see anorexia as people that are 90 pounds. We don't look at people that are 200 pounds and think
Right.
maybe they're starving themselves. But my body has been trying to preserve itself so hard that it was holding on to everything. So when I eat, when I make it to that 2,000 calorie a day, I actually start burning more. My metabolism kicks in and I actually can look better and feel better. And the second crazy thing that happened is that I did this interesting kind of trauma work, which is PMLity's work, which is called PIA. And you kind of imagine the people in the room that gave you this shame and fear, and you very powerfully give it back to them. So you look at that nutritionist, you look at your mother, you look at your sisters, your teachers, whoever told you you're fat, and you tell them, this is your fat, this is your shame. You gave it to me. I no longer own it, and this is all yours. And in that moment, I wish I would have a picture of my body before and after. My stomach, the shape of my stomach totally changed. Like the shame left. It's just like I keep looking myself in the mirror every morning since then. And I'm like, I had this bulge and it's not there. And it was because I was holding on to fear and shame that wasn't mine. And that was the actual fat on my body. And the more I give people back their shame and their fear and their emotions, and I don't carry it, that is codependency, carrying other people's emotions. I've recognized that when I hold on to other people's emotions, I don't let them feel their emotions, and therefore they can't heal and do their work. So it's my responsibility to not carry other people's emotions. When I give it back to them, I feel more empowered. I don't want to use the word skinnier, but like I can move, I feel myself.
Hmm.
It's a fascinating journey.
Wow. Actually, I had somebody on the podcast, Silky Resnikoff, who does PM Melody's work, did her work and does her work. You know her?
No, I don't.
No? But tell us, so I know you have a PowerPoint that you want to share. So when we originally spoke about recording this episode, you told me that you went to Florida. You went somewhere, right? And
Arizona.
Arizona. And I have a really bad memory, by the way. That's why I write down everything. So was this all like an epiphany because of that trip? Was it all like it all came to you? Like how did how did it
It,
come to you?
the culmination was on that trip because I actually met the founder of Codependence Anonymous and in his private practice. And he connected me to an eating disorder specialist that specializes in showing people the correlation between codependency and eating disorders. And so that was huge. I don't know how much your viewers know. If they know about P-Melody work, they must probably know a bit about codependence. Like, did she talk in that episode about codependency?
She
Um,
did. It was a very long time ago. I want to say it was like 4 years ago. So people,
oh,
I'll put the link in this episode so people could listen to both.
yeah. Okay. So basically, yeah, it was that epiphany of the correlation between, I kept on trying to do the work and heal myself, uh, with my relationship with food, but because I was missing this vital piece of understanding how I act, how my actions, not around food, how my emotions correlate to my food.
Hmm.
That was missing, so I couldn't do the work. Now that I know that, I can do the work, and I think that that is very vital, and that is what I want to share with your audience today.
Okay, so let's do it.
Okay, so we're basically going back to like talking about where we started of what codependency is. And really it's what is trauma? That's the original question to ask. How do I do this? Okay, so let me share my screen.
Okay, let's just make sure that you're, yeah, okay, good.
We're good.
Yep.
Okay. So here's what happens. Anytime, child is born, mother says, "Why did you do this? You're so stupid," right? Or any kind of trauma, physical, mental, emotional, sexual abuse. Um, and trauma is enmeshment. Okay, so enmeshment means making somebody else take care of your responsibilities. If you had to be a parent for a parent, if you had to show up as a parent for somebody, if there were blurred lines of boundaries of like what's my responsibility, what's your responsibility, what are my emotions, what are your emotions, if there's neglect, if your needs weren't taken care of, and there was abuse, this is what happens. Depending on our epigenetics, we either move to freeze, fawn, or fight, flight. So what is, everybody knows about like, a tiger comes, right? And there is fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? So this is exactly what trauma is. And we all experience some form of trauma. You know, growing up is a traumatic event. Childhood is a traumatic event. Why? Because we have this parent that's telling us what to do. And that in itself is just a traumatic event, and it's not a bad thing. This is how we grow. This is how we create our character. This is how we become strong, resilient. Now, the problem is that at one point we need to realize that all these coping mechanisms that we used in order to get by in our childhood are no longer serving us. And how do we switch them out with other things that help us exist in this world as a healthy adult? So there, depending on how traumatic, if you have a little bit trauma, then you can bounce back into your empowerment zone. Empowerment is knowing who your true self is, having a healthy sense of self, identity, self-esteem, everything that has the word self in it is in our empowerment zone. So if you grew up relatively healthy, you might bounce a minute to fight, flight, fawn, freeze, but you'll come back to empowerment zone. If you constantly have either one big traumatic effect or constantly have repetitive trauma, you might go into either fight, flight, or fawn, freeze. Um, what's fawn and freeze? Fawn and freeze is people pleasing. So that's fawn. I'm gonna do everything that you want. Maybe you'll like me so you won't hurt me. That's people pleasing. Shame is when we have our parents give us shame, we assume that it's our fault because nobody wants to feel like, oh, I'm being taken care of by bad people. Everybody
Hmm.
wants that the parents are the best. So we take on the shame. We
Hmm.
become needy. We feel powerless. We feel we have poor boundaries. We don't know how to stick up for ourselves. We become passive. We don't feel deserving of standing up for our needs. We feel less than. We feel one down. We exhibit OCD. Uh, you know, obsessive compulsive doing or compulsive thinking. Not being able to stop yourself from thinking of something is poor boundaries. It's internal self boundaries that we're missing. Some of us become controlling. So we control people and environments in order to feel safe. If I'm going to know where my husband is every minute of the day, then I won't feel abandoned. So I will feel safe, but then I'm not letting them live, right? I'm giving an
Right.
example.
Right.
Uh, we feel rigid. So those people that show up always looking perfect and are very rigid thinkers, and they become critical of themselves and others. I didn't share this in the beginning, but my husband and I are recovering in 12-step programs. My husband used to gamble a lot. We all share this message. We believe this is our way of helping the world by sharing our message, and I've done plenty of podcasts talking about being the spouse of an addict. And I would say we have the privilege because it was, gambling addiction is not such a shameful addiction. There are people that, have way worse addiction. The problem is that we glorify work addiction and it's just as much an addiction. And and that's how I came to help other spouses of addicts. And that's how I came to the whole world of codependency because everybody understands that the spouse of an addict is a codependent, but
Hmm.
nobody realizes it in different lower degrees around us in the whole world. Spouses of entrepreneurs, COOs, all these people, because entrepreneurs and addicts have that correlation of addictive behavior.
Hmm.
So the reason I'm saying this is that this zipped up look, this of being perfect, showing up with perfectionism is a freeze response. It's a fawn freeze response. I'm going to, and that's where anorexia happens. It's like we're going to show zipped up. I'm going to be perfect. I'm going to be skinny. The world's going to like me, and that's how I'm not going to get hurt. Now, on the other side, we have the fight flight response. And that is where addiction lives when it's stimulating addiction of a need for chaos, running to substance abuse, um, you know, being an avoidant, running away from emotions, running away from people, not being able to take care of people. And the fascinating thing is that people that usually are in fawn freeze tend to attract fight flight, unavailable partners, and that's where this whole dance happens, right?
Hmm.
It and it fuels our codependency and it fuels the other person's addiction. People that are compulsive, they just need more of everything. The fight response is I'm going to show you, and the flight response is I'm going to run away from you. So I'm going to show you is where you become the savior, you become the big ego, one up, you're better than them and all that. And the flight response is where you become compulsive, you run away, you're avoiding, and you're just a lot of fear. So, what does empowerment look like? Empowerment is knowing your truth, staying in a healthy self identity, a healthy self esteem, and having a connection with your higher power, whatever that means to you. Being able to live in a world where you're kind of having this third person looking down and seeing what's going on, being a self observer, that's the highest goal and the highest level of consciousness. So, what happens is, you get into an argument with somebody and you have your truth and the other person has their truth, but you don't see it if you're stuck inside of it.
Hmm.
Being able to take a step out and say, how do I see myself? How do I see the other person from a third person perspective? That is true empowerment and being connected to a higher power. Does that does this all still
Yes,
get
I'm with you.
okay?
I think that that's like one of the main goals, like in therapy, right? Is that like you like we'll say to somebody, like look at your life or look at this circumstance with curiosity instead of judgment, right? Same thing with like the intuitive eating model is like self-compassion. It's like seeing it like you're watching yourself as a third party observer, but it's obviously easier said than done. It's very hard to do that, but it is, I guess, kind of like the way to like to examine our behaviors is through that third party lens.
Right. And it's the ultimate goal. I think that it's all about knowing where we're going. Life is all about what am I striving towards? I might not ever get there because none of us are angels, but
Hmm.
where am I heading to? And constantly keeping that picture very clearly in front of us, that's our life's work. And it makes it so much easier. If I know this is where I'm heading to, then I know the path. And even if I stumble 5 times a day, I still know where my northern star is.
Right.
And absolutely, being open, curious, self-compassion is empowerment. Because go back to that little child that falls down. A parent that says, "Why did you go on the bike without a helmet?"
Right.
Puts the child into fawn freeze or fight flight. A parent that has teaches the child self-compassion and says, "Oh my gosh, it might hurt someone. That was a bummer. That really flopped.
Hmm.
Didn't work out." Right? This child is now taught that they're not having feelings is not a bad thing. It's not scary. We're not running from our feelings. We're feeling it,
Hmm.
and we're doing what's most important for the situation.
Right.
That is assertiveness. That is self-empowerment. And you know, a role of a coach, a parent, a teacher is to be the parent for that person until that person can parent it themselves. In transactional analysis in the ego states, it's there's the child, then comes the parent, and then comes the adult, and then the higher self. And
Hmm.
it's fascinating because by the age of 13, a child should be able to self-soothe, have self-compassion, have a good self-identity. It's a parent's job to do that for a child critically till the age of 13, 15. Once
Hmm.
we hit that age, we're kind of becoming equals with our kids, and it's all about like just cheering them on, not being too critical, um, letting them experience consequences and all that. So it's fascinating how the effective coaches and therapists show up as a compassionate parent to that person until the parent can do that for themselves, their patient, and then be on their own.
Right. It's like with my clients, like I don't want them to be with me forever, right? I'm supposed to be there as a very compassionate listener and as somebody who has the information that they need and the tools, and then they have to use it themselves, you know?
Right. You
That's the
give them
goal.
openness, curiosity, until they can get it themselves. When they can become open and curious about themselves on their own, then you know that you've helped them,
Yeah, 100%.
right? So, okay, so how does this relate to food?
Yeah.
What happens is when people go into fawn and freeze, that's when we restrict. We don't eat. It's that zipped up feeling. It's that, I'm gonna be please the people around me. I'm going to freeze, right? You're literally frozen. On the other hand, when we go into fight flight, that's where we binge and we lose control or we feel out of control around food. We think that food, on both ends, food is controlling us. It's just
Hmm.
in opposite ways.
Right.
Empowerment is I have control. I know I love the word intuitive eating literally means tapping into your sense of intuition. And
Hmm.
that empowerment. Nobody needs to tell you what you should be eating. You should be able to sit with yourself and say, what feels good for me today?
Hmm. Hmm.
What I learned in the journey with you in eating. You asked me before we recorded which came first or which should come first. And the answer is there's no way, there's no one right way. You either find intuitive eating and do the work and then hit a roadblock and realize that there is trauma that you need to work through. Or
Yeah.
you know that there's trauma and you work it through and then you realize, okay, I need to learn the skills of intuitive eating because intuitive eating is basically reteaching that 7-year-old to trust themselves
Right.
and reparenting ourselves. That's all it is. It's reparenting ourselves, right?
Totally.
So it's which way are we going about it, right? So okay, so what does it mean? So
Wait,
this is
could you go back to the other slide for a second? I think you're gonna say this, but what came to mind for me when you showed this image of like restrict is fawn, freeze, and binge is fight, flight, like it always brings me back to like my most disordered eating when I was in 11th grade. That like you feel so, I want to say empowered, strong when you're restricting and you're hungry and you're like, I am starving and I am so strong, even though it is such a false sense of empowerment, right? But it's like now that I'm an adult and I have had feelings of empowerment, I can't say I'm always in an empowered state, but I have had feelings of empowerment. It's like that feeling of empowerment when you're restricting food is very, very false compared to the real feeling. And it's the same thing in binge when, um, like I think about times when like I was going from restricting to binging. um I never really had like issues with binging, but I had issues with like feeling like, oh, it's Shabbos and now I'm gonna have 3 bags of snacks and a bunch of candy, even though I didn't really want it because it was like Shabbos and that's when I allowed myself. And on the one hand, you're like, again, asserting yourself, like I can do whatever I want, but you're also feeling very out of control. So like I just relate to both of those feelings very much.
I'm so grateful that you shared your journey because instead of going to the next slide and just giving you a whole bunch of words, can we dig a little bit deeper of like what were the feelings you were going through when you were in restrict? Like not related to food. What were you feeling?
Oh, so my MO, like my whole life, I felt like inadequate, less than self, self-conscious, like unwanted. Those were always like I'm the fourth of nine, right? I wasn't like specifically very smart. I wasn't really good at anything specifically. I was very good at losing weight.
Mm.
And I had a lot of willpower, quote unquote, and I was very that was where I showed my discipline. I wasn't good at school, you know? Um, so like all those feelings became very, very like I became very empowered through my restricting because I got so much attention and I was good at something and I was liked, you know? So,
So you were fawning, you were being liked. So this is the exercise I want listeners to do. I want them to write down on a piece of paper, fawn, freeze, restrict on one side, binge, fight, flight on another side, and empowerment in the center. What I didn't say before is like when we have an eating disorder, our empowerment center is very narrow. And the job is to get it wider and wider and wider so we less time spent in restrict and binge and more in empowerment. And instead of me, I'm going to give you my examples that came up for me, but this is not universally for everybody. What are you feeling when you can't eat, when you're on restrict? I was talking to somebody and she's like, I made myself a shake, but by the time I got into the car, I didn't want to eat it anymore. And I said, what were you feeling? And it came up not good enough.
mhm,
Okay, that's why you're restricting. So you're feeling not good enough. So now I'm going to have power by not eating. You understand how it's asserting ourselves in a sick way, you
yeah,
know? Um, so if you can make a list of everything that came up for you, you said, um, pleasing, feeling in control. So I'll share what came up for me, okay? Go to phone freeze first. A lot of fear of what's happening tomorrow, what's happening next. Will my kids make the bus? Will my kids be liked in school? Will I have what to eat later? A lot of shame, body shame, a ton of body shame, not being good enough. Even before I have a session, I realize that before I have a session with my clients, I don't eat because I'm
mhm,
like, will I be good? Will I be doing a good job? So it's a way,
mhm,
you know, obsessive thinking, not trusting people, relationships, Hashem, not trusting the environment, not trusting that there will be enough, feeling heavy, feeling puffy, feeling knotted, knot in my stomach. I realized that all my nausea was a response of fawn and freeze, holding all that fear and shame in my stomach, obsessive thoughts, feeling undeserving. Yeah, I think those are the things that came up for me. For everybody, it's going to be something else. And that's the job to find out what you're feeling when you are restricting. So this was the breakthrough because when I wake up and I feel nauseous, I no longer say, oh, I'm nauseous. I say, what am I feeling? Am I feeling fear? Am I feeling shame? And then how can I get past that feeling into my empowerment zone? And I came up with a list of things that help me get past that. And I will show you my list. And the job is for everybody to make their list. Is
mhm.
it working through those feelings? Is it journaling? Is it grounding? What do you need to do? Tell me what happened when you were in binge. What were you feeling? Fight, flight.
I have to think about that. I was feeling, what's the feeling of rebelliousness, like exercising autonomy, like
Yeah, rebellious.
aggression. Is that like aggression? Because it's not assertive.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it's aggression and rebelliousness.
Yeah.
You're so on target.
Well, I happen to know a little bit about this. Um, I think that I'm really going back to like a specific time in my life. I think I was feeling a lot of like sadness and again, inadequacy. I think I felt inadequate as a dietitian at this point because this was before I learned about intuitive eating. So I was confused as to my own method of eating. Like, should I do
Mm,
this? Should I not do this? Why am I doing this? I was so quote unquote healthy during the week, like I would never eat candy or cake or anything, but it was like it was such a bad feeling on Shabbos to be like, I'm eating this just because I can't eat it during the week, even though like I'm not really like enjoying it that much. It was just like, um,
Was it like self-soothing?
yeah, probably self-soothing. Um, Also, like, you know that feeling when you like do anything, you eat something or you do something and you're like, this is going to be amazing and it's not, but you do it
Right.
anyways.
Yeah, compulsiveness.
Yeah, I think so.
Like more and more and more.
Right,
Hoping you're gonna get that high and that fix, and then it's not coming, so you want more.
right.
That is the definition of addiction.
And
Like,
that's what happens with binging a lot. Yeah,
right, we're gonna consume to soothe our feelings and to numb ourselves, and then when it doesn't happen, so we do more and more, and we develop intolerance at one point, right?
right.
So for me, in my binge came up overindulgent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, being overstimulated. I realized that weddings, bedtime, Shabbos, it's overstimulating things because of my PTSD of chaos, a lot of noise. Soothing myself in chaos is a way of eating. So it's funny, it came up rebelliousness. Like, if you're gonna tell me what to do, I'm gonna defy
Yeah,
it,
right.
right? Um, Toxic shame. So there's that shame of like feeling very embarrassed, and then toxic shame is like feeling dirty, feeling like I don't, like I don't deserve this whole thing from like a way other level. Not having boundaries. So not being able to tap into like how much is enough, or where do I start? Where do I end? Like having to talk too much even to overtake and make sure
Right,
everybody's
right.
comfortable. um,
Yeah,
Many choices, seeing a ton of food and really like freaking out, you know, using it as a distraction, using it when I'm panicking, being sneaky with food, which what else? Hoarding food. Those are like when I know that I'm in binge mode. Make sense?
yeah, yeah, totally. I'm just like what's coming up for me also is like the toxic shame when you said like feeling dirty. Like I've had, like I see a very big correlation with eating disorders and sexual abuse, right? So for people who are sexually abused, that's like a really big theme of like my body's dirty, I'm dirty, I did a dirty thing, even though of course it was not their fault and they did nothing wrong. Um, Someone did something horrible to them, but it's like that's like a good way of explaining it is like toxic shame. People actually feel a similar, if not the same degree of that really dirty feeling when they binge. And that could be related to sexual abuse, and it could also not be related to sexual abuse.
Yeah, and I think sexual abuse is so much more prevalent than we want to admit. It's fascinating how 80-90% of food disorders are related to sexual abuse. One in four girls get sexually abused, and it means just a cross of boundaries and a loss of control, a loss of trust. And it's not like when people are like, oh, big deal. It's not. It's now somebody that you thought was supposed to be out there for you was hurting you and you lost trust, and now you're dysregulated to such a deep degree you don't know anymore how to relate to the world, and you shut yourself inside. And if you were abused in a way where you were told you're so pretty and whatever, and you're irresistible, and you make men sin because they look at you, right? You can either go to this restrict side where you become super skinny and you act out that way, or the binge side where I'm going to eat and become so, you know, in a way where nobody's going to want to look at me, nobody's going to want to touch me because I'm going to just create so much protection
Right.
around.
Yeah.
um
That
yeah,
is common. That's actually very common. One second, hold on, one more thing. Oh yeah, the chaos thing is interesting. So I'm one of nine. You're one of a lot more, I think, right?
yeah. 16.
16, yeah. Oh my gosh. So I think that it's interesting. Like I'm not like knocking people's, choices, and people have big families and it's a beautiful thing. It's just like the chaos thing really speaks to me because like it was always very overstimulating in my house. And actually it's like I don't know if I'm just saying this because this happened to me today that I went to a really busy store to go
Mhm.
shopping, and that too many choices and the chaos like or like for example, for example, like I hired an organizer to come help me organize my house because like I also grew up in like a really, busy house, and it really bothered me and I wanted it to be different as an adult. And it's not that I'm super disorganized. I just think like I really wanted to develop those skills that not everybody has. And like for some reason, like when she would go into my closet and take my stuff out, I'm just like feeling super overwhelmed. Like literally, like my friend who's a therapist is like, "You're having a trauma response to this lady." And I'm like, I know. I'm like, I feel like I'm crawling out of my skin, And it's like these interesting things that come up, like, why am I having like a freak attack over this lady trying to organize my closet? Or why am I feeling like I'm gonna faint in this store?
Ah, I could totally relate to that. I avoid public, overcrowded places like the plague. I do all my grocery shopping online. People are like, oh, go to weddings, whatever. I'd rather go like a one-on-one date night with my husband to a wedding. And I'm like, when I go, I end up enjoying myself. I also overcompensate by talking a lot, and people mistaken me for an extrovert. I'm actually very not extroverted. I'm an introvert. I need a lot of space, but I overcompensate by being very loud. And
Hmm.
that's where I go into binge. So I overstimulate myself, and
Right.
then it
It's
can
interesting.
trigger itself.
That's really interesting. It's very interesting. Yeah. But not everybody from big families feels that way?
Yeah, it's epigenetics. Some of us, feel go to that, and some of us feel fine, and some of us go into strict binge. Everybody copes. Again, it's coping skills that we develop as kids, and then recognizing that this is no longer serving us.
Right. That's the IFS model also. Like the internal family systems model is that like we developed these coping strategies as kids that actually did protect us. And now as adults, they're harming us and how to utilize them in a more positive way.
Right. IFS is just a newer version of the parts in our child. It's like everything is so interrelated. And
Yeah.
often people say, okay, so what was the one therapy you did that did it for you? And I'm like, there is no one. I've
Right.
done so many interesting therapies, and it's a little bit of everything.
Right. Totally.
Can you pause for a minute? I need to
Sure.
plug the laptop.
Mm-hmm.
So we spoke about like the different feelings that get us into restrict and binge. Now, how do we get ourselves out of there and into our state of empowerment? And that is recognizing, how do we feel when we're doing good? Like when we're eating well, when we're listening to our bodies, when we're in our healthy sense of self, right? So what is it for you? Like instead of being, I can give you my list first.
Right.
It's, what do I need to do to unfreeze myself? I need to stimulate myself. How do I stimulate? Meditation, baths, chewing ice, recognizing my hunger and fullness, journaling, intuitive eating, calling someone, playing, self-compassion, grounding. What do I need to do when I'm in binge? I need to ground myself. Sometimes it's like looking at my hands and ask myself, how old are you? Or where am I? Looking intensively, like staring at something, chewing slowly. Sometimes all of the same things that stimulate me also ground me. So journaling, slowing down, meditating, it's all where my empowerment lives. And the more I can do that more often and get my empowerment state bigger and bigger is where success lies, where I'm not swinging to either side and I'm
Hmm.
still at centered place. So for everybody, this is going to be different, really. It's figuring out what is it that puts you into that healthy sense of self. So what comes up for you?
That's a great question. And it happens to be this is something really, really hard for me. For all the advice that I give to people, I feel dysregulated often. Um, so I do need to have a lot of tools in my toolkit. So first of all, I love to, I have to have a good self-care plan for in general before I get to a negative space. So I love to exercise. Exercise is very regulating for me. With like usually for me it's like loud, loud music where I'm finally out of my head. Even I was gonna say podcast is great, but I sometimes like talk about like over addiction to work. Like I shouldn't be listening to podcasts all day. There's like too many thoughts in my head. There's too many opinions in my head. And I've come to realize that when like after a while I'm like, I don't think this is normal. Um, I really like hanging out with like one or two really close friends at a time, just like schmoozing, having deep, meaningful conversations. As cliche as that sounds, I love like discussing something to like the core. I'm very like cerebral. Like I really enjoy cooking. I really enjoy the process of it. That's for me, it's very immersive. It's like the smelling and the touching, the tasting, the sharing. It's like I really have come to realize how much why food is so soothing for me, not just eating it, the experience of food. Um, because like I love to eat, but I really more prefer to be involved in the food. Like I'm the type of person, actually just went to Kosher Palooza and I really enjoyed it because my everybody who's close to me knows this that when I go to a restaurant, I don't want to order one dish. I want to order like 10 dishes and we'll all take one or two bites because that's like, it's like tasting eating is a whole body experience, right? Because you see the food, you hear the food, you smell the food, right? And you share the food. Yes, I love food. Um I I usually call my sister some of my sisters who just like I could hash it out with. Um I like sitting outside. Now that it's nice out, I sit in my backyard a lot. It's really, really just calming. I love the water. I like to bike ride to the water. I love sitting by the water. Things like that.
Yeah, that's
I
so
like
cool.
sitting.
Yeah, I started sitting outside 5 minutes of sun just to wake me
Yeah.
up, you
Yeah.
know? It's been in some things that you mentioned that are interesting. The fact that you have such a dynamic relationship with food, like it's an experience, the cooking, the baking, whatever, like I'm jealous. I want that. I think that
Yeah.
that's growth and that's what healthy looks like. For me right now, cooking actually puts me into restrict. I tend to not eat the food that I cook. I start going into this fear based of like maybe I'll go out of control, so I'm gonna have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Am I good enough? Am I good enough cook? I think it's not gonna come out right. That all that
Mm-hmm.
self-talk puts me in restrict. On the other hand, let's say going to Kosher Palooza, like that was a big no-no for me. Like the chaos and the amount of food and the choices would put me into a feeling of like feeling out of control and into binge. So
Mm-hmm.
I think progress would be to be able to go to such a place and
Right.
really come out and know how to regulate myself fast enough that it should
Mm-hmm.
3 days, you know? Because
Yeah.
I am an introvert in that way. Like if I go to
Right.
that, I would need 3 days of downtime from the
Right.
of people, food, music, tons of overstimulation.
Right.
Thinking about restaurants, I recognized this very interesting thing the other day. I mean, a while ago. You know about the love languages, right? So my first love language is gifts. My husband's first is quality time and acts of service. And for some reason, we found that restaurants satisfy both of our love language. Because when I am served, it feels like a gift. It
Mm-hmm.
feels as a mother that feeds kids and all that, being served like feels like it's such a huge gift for me. And being able to experience food, like I think at restaurants is the only time that I actually experience food.
Mm-hmm.
Taste, the color, the texture, the sounds, all of that. It's like such a sacred container environment. I know, like to some people, like they're like, oh, people spend so much on restaurants. To me, restaurants became so much more than food.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a beautiful place to, like, we remember which restaurant we cried, we laughed, the conversations we had. And for my husband, it's quality time. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that he would say, like, sometimes on a Friday long afternoon, he's like, hey, you want to come out for lunch? And I would think to myself, we just had breakfast. And then I realized that he didn't want food. He just wants to sit and spend time.
Right. Right.
Sometimes we don't even need to talk. Sometimes we just sit there, you know?
Right.
And so it's really fascinating how we have taken food and we've made it so bad and rigid where really food is so much more than that, you know? So
Yeah.
I think that's super that was a very big breakthrough for me.
That's really interesting. So I want to say a lot of things to the things that you just said. So first of all, as I get older and I heal from my own stuff, I think I realized that I might be more extroverted than I ever thought I was. I think of myself as a classic introvert because I'm very quiet. I'm not a loud person and I don't draw attention to myself. I don't think. You've met me in person,
Yeah.
right? I'm not like that. I don't make a lot of noise. I'm not like calling attention to myself, but I love love conversing with people. I think I'm a pretty good conversationalist. I love meeting new people. I love asking about them. I love hearing their story, hence the whole podcast thing. And like Kosher Palooza didn't really like throw me off, which is like funny. And I actually went to a conference the day before. I went to that Accelerate conference that I asked if you were going to, and that was lots of people, lots of talking, giving out my business card, making connections, and I was like, actually enjoy this. And if this was 5 or 6 or 10 years ago, I would have felt so nervous. I said before, like I used to feel very, very insecure, not enough. Like, what am I saying? I'm saying weird things and people looking at me like my wig looks weird. And now it's like, I think intuitive eating, just in general, I know I'm obsessed with intuitive eating, but it's helped me. Like for example, I just went out with a few people and someone said to me, like, oh, I look so gross. Like they were feeling very insecure about the way they looked. And I was like, I'm just letting you know. I know you didn't ask me, but if this is helpful for you, what I try to do when I hang out with people is like recognize that there's going to be moments of insecurity. Like, do I look bad? Do I look weird? Does this make me look blah, blah, blah? And like, okay, recognize that my brain's going to do that. And also, like, I love hanging out with these people. This food is so yummy. This restaurant's so cool. Whatever. We don't have to be eating, but I'm just saying, like, it's like a shift from my brain. Um, so that's interesting because like the whole like dysregulation of people could be so painful for some people, especially like if it's a barrier, like you want to go but you can't because of the social anxiety. I'm not saying I don't struggle with social anxiety. I'm just saying that like there must have been some sort of healing when it comes to like being my true self, that I was able to do that without it like being totally dysregulating.
It's interesting they say that because I have so much more to say on that. It's actually, if you put, for me, part of my journey was giving myself permission to say that I don't need to go to networking events. I don't need to be out there. Codependency can come up and show up in many different ways. One of the ways it can come up is that you give more information that you really initially wanted to. And when you find yourself telling people your whole life story in like in one sentence, the first second that you meet, it's a codependent response. Like, I hope they're gonna like me, so I'm gonna say all that.
Right.
And you're like, why did I tell them all these things? And you feel violated. That sort of happened to me in many different ways when I would be in very social environments. And a few months ago, like I sat down and I said, I believe Hashem is going to give me the business, everything that I need without going to any conferences and any networking events. And I decided to take like a sabbatical and not go to any networking events for a certain amount of time. I felt so much better. My quality of business has gone up. The people that because whoever needs me is going to reach out to me. I'm on social media. I'm putting myself out there in the way that I feel that is safe and right for me. For me, it's interesting how it flips. Like for me, the healing was not going against myself, not betraying myself all the time and
Right.
putting myself in these social places where I really don't want to be. Like
Right.
I don't even feel 1 ounce of FOMO from Kosher Palooza. It's
Good.
crazy, you
Why
know?
should you? Why should you?
Right. But like if I would have really wanted to be there and I don't go,
Yeah.
it's not being true to myself. But if I'm
Yeah.
like, this is really not interesting for me, it's not what I want, being
Right.
able to, so part of healing from codependency is what I've summed it down to is developing what I call ADD, and not the visionary kind, not the ADD kind. What it really stands for is assertiveness. So being able to stay in your empowerment, say what you need and say what you mean and mean what you say. Most of us fall into passive aggressive patterns. A lot of spouses, a lot of women tend to fall into passive aggressive with their husbands. We're like, what do you mean you didn't take out that garbage? You didn't see the garbage there?
Right. Right.
And no, he had no idea. And you owe it to tell that person in a very direct yet loving way of what you need.
Right.
Tendency is expecting the people around you to assume and know and need what you wanted. And really, when we do that, we demonstrate to our kids and our spouses how we allow them to treat us. And which leads me to decisiveness is having boundaries, and that's internal boundaries. Being able to be your own parent, being able to tell yourself no, being able to tell yourself not now, maybe later, even to shame thoughts, even to negative thoughts. A thought comes into your head, you look at it and you say, I see you, but now's not the right time. It's like your child asking for candy, and it's not that candy's bad, it's just right before bedtime, it's just not the right time, you know? Being able to have a boundary and say, "Not the right time," you know, is having decisiveness, knowing what we are, knowing what we stand for, knowing what our identity is, without having to have other people confirm it for us. Going back to, I find that a lot of women, when we get in public, many of them are self-deprecating. "I look
Uh-huh.
so blah, blah, blah." It's really codependent. It's waiting for the other person to tell you, "No, you don't feel so." What? Are we ever gonna tell another woman, "No, you look terrible. I know, you look horrible today."
Right.
Are we ever gonna do that?
No.
No. So why is that person coming and saying, "I feel so bad"?
Right.
Because they're waiting for you to make them feel good.
I have to say something. I have to say something. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Okay. You're gonna laugh. Okay, I hope that my audience thinks it's funny. So basically, I need validation. Okay, yes, last week I had
It's
this
external
really,
validation, yeah.
yes, but I want to tell you why I'm proud of myself. Last week I had this thing on my nose. I thought it was like a pimple or something. It was actually like my nose was infected. I had an infection in my nose. Why? Because I have like allergies and I don't really know understand why, but I have allergies and I always need to blow my nose and I guess something got into my nose. Sorry if that's graphic. And it was like it looked like I told my sister it looks like I was growing another nose. Like it had like and I was like, what should I do? Should I stay at home? Should I like I couldn't like it was no cover up was covering up a second nose, you know? So I had to like I went to Manhattan, I had to go to Manhattan and I even like recorded I wanted to record a video for Instagram of this recipe that I did. So I was like, my sister-in-law pointed this out to me once that women, when we like, when we're insecure about something on our face or something obvious, like, oh, I have a pimple, like we have to say it right away, like, oh, don't notice my pimple because like once you say it, like I know that you know, and you see it, right? And I was like, I am going to actively not say anything about the thing on my nose, even though every single person who I come in contact with sees it because the people who I'm very close with, and I was telling them, oh, I have this infection on my nose. They're like, oh yeah, I noticed that. I'm like, I know you did. It was right on my nose. So I was thinking like, it's just so funny how like, again, like it comes with maturity, like in a way, like I was like, okay, so my nose has something on it. Like, and therefore I'm still Gila, the same Gila who just has something on her nose, you know? So like if you it was hard for me because like I see it with like teenagers, like younger kids or even people in their 20s, like maybe they wouldn't even go out, it would be like very shameful for them. Like when I was a teenager, I would feel really embarrassed if I had like a pimple on my nose and I would feel like even I can't go out. So just, I know that sounds random, but it's like not asking someone to be like, it's okay. I didn't even notice it. It's like, it's okay.
Yeah,
Like, you
you
know,
just you just pointed on such an important part, that codependency is external validation, needing other people to tell you you're okay. And that also relates to that our identity is based off of what other people think of us or our roles. And I wish if there's one message that all Jewish women could hear, it's who are you when you are not a mother, a wife, a daughter? Who are you? What do you love? What do you do? Because we attach our identities to what we do, and that's when we fail. Because if our child tells us we're not a good mother, and if our child picks a derech that we don't like, it's now a reflection of us. And then we act codependently in a way of trying to control our child to bring them back to where we think they should be, which is really the ultimate form of codependence is narcissism. It's trying to you're in the center of all of this. You're trying to control all of this because I know what's best for you, and now it's all about you. It's not even about your child. And we do that as wives, as spouses, as mothers, as daughters. And if we can really just wake up every morning and say, who am I if I would be alone on an island? What would I love to eat? What would the most? So I went all the way to Arizona to meet the founder of Coda, and I was in an Airbnb and I had to go fill it up. This was such a powerful moment for me. And it's going to be the introduction of my next book. I went to the grocery and I'm like mindlessly pushing the cart. And suddenly, like after 3 aisles, I look inside and I see my husband's favorite foods. I see my kids' favorite foods. I see all the vegetables that I don't like, but my mom told me I have to eat. And I'm like, I'm alone in Arizona. These people are not even here.
right.
And I put all these things into my cart and I was like, do I even know what my favorite food is? And it was such a moment. I had to take everything out of the carriage. I went back to aisle one. I looked at everything and I said, do I need this? Do I need this? Am I buying it for myself? Am I buying it for somebody else? It was that moment of understanding that I'm constantly bringing other people's reality into existence, and I'm waiting for the world to give me permission to bring my own reality to existence. Who do I wanna be? I wanna be loud, I wanna be out there, I wanna make a difference, I wanna be on podcasts, I wanna have a beautiful house, I wanna dress up a certain way, I wanna wear red lipstick every single day. You know, that's who I wanna be, and when I can own that, and I can look at everybody else and give them back their shame to the people around me and say that, "You can't do that, it's Monday, and you can't wear, your Shabbos clothing on Monday." I was posting on Instagram that I was wearing Shabbos robe on Sunday because I was in Arizona, and there was no Jews around, so nobody knows it's a Shabbos robe, and has nothing to do with Yiddishkeit. It's the fact that we create stupid rules in our head. It's the same tznius, it's a dress. Who
Right.
decided to only wear it on Shabbos?
Right. And one thing that I wrote down that I wanted to just bring up is that like I think for me, that's why I really social media totally dysregulates me, and it's like a sad reality for me because I'm still on social media and I don't know how to get off it. Maybe that's my
I'm
own
right there with
codependency. I feel like it's like you can't not. I wish that I didn't care, but you cannot check like your likes compared to someone else's likes, or you're like your business. My business is my life, and for better or for worse. Like I love my business, but I also want to break from it sometimes, and I can't get a break from it, but I also don't want to break from it because it's a blah, blah, blah. Like it's just I don't know. I have this love hate relationship with social media because like we met on social media. I met so many awesome people on social media. I've learned so much from social media. I hope that I teach on social media, right now. This is a medium of social media. But like it just I think I don't know, I just feel like let's say on Yantiv or Shabbos and I can't use my phone, like I am much more myself because I'm not thinking that'd be a cool post. Let me see if someone like, and it's like that's like everything in life has its pros and cons, but I think social media tends to specifically take us out of ourselves.
Yeah, I was doing a meditation one day and it came up the need for external validation and seeing myself through the lens of Instagram. I literally lived my life at one point where I'm like, are people gonna like this? What are people gonna like this? Can I
Right.
post this? Can I not post
Right.
this?
Right.
And I think there is a fine line, I believe. I believe Hashem gives us everything to create good and bad. And we can create influence. Like I've done recently a good few podcasts, and the amount of responses I'm getting from people that are like not out there, but they're like quietly watching, listening, and I'm realizing that that's my mission to speak up for people that can't speak up, that are too ashamed to speak up and to create change. Like coming on here and saying like, I totally have disordered eating. Like people are gonna listen to this, my family, people that close me, and they're gonna be like, what? And like, how dare you say this in public? And you know what? That is healing. Healing, we're only as sick as our secrets. We're only as sick as our secrets, and things grow in dark, cold places. So we need to bring all these issues out in the limelight in order to not recreate those experiences for the next generation. And living my life from a true place first, and then going on social media
Hmm.
is what's key. Maybe it's doing a 3-minute meditation. Maybe it's putting like, I don't open my phone until 10 o'clock in the morning because I do all these other things before to make sure that my self-esteem is in a right place. Maybe putting an hour window, and I'm talking for myself there. I started at least putting out my phone of my room when I go to sleep. So that was a big step. And I
So what's
always
your alarm?
it's right outside, like it's in my bathroom that's right off my room.
Oh,
It's
smart.
not near my bed. It's my alarm, but I have to get up to close my alarm.
Right.
So that makes me have to get out of bed.
Right.
It's amazing because like that I don't snooze.
Right.
And I always read an actual paper book, like literally at least a paragraph before I go to sleep, so I can like regulate myself. I started journaling. I do a very simple journal on my feelings. There are seven primary feelings. Going through your day and saying, did you feel fear, shame, lonely, joy? Of course, I'm not going to remember all of them right now because, you know,
Hmm.
but going through and making sure, like, so I can regulate myself. Those are 2 things I go do before I go to sleep. My morning is still a struggle. I literally, like, wake up, put the kids on the bus, and then I'm on Instagram for an hour, which is really not good because I really need that hour to exercise and meditate and make myself food. So that's my next goal of maybe not looking on social media until 10 o'clock. And if I have
We'll be accountability buddies because it's so hard.
yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Just
This was so amazing. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing this. I'm debating if I should like try to get this out like right before Shavuos, to people please. I'm just kidding. But like, so people have because I have nothing to listen to myself before Shavuos. So I'm like, well, as I cook and shop, that not none of things that I have done yet. It's nice to have something to listen to. But
whatever works for
yeah,
you. And
yeah.
I hope that this creates the impact it was intended to, and that people find their healing.
Yes, I mean, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and speaking up and being brave and teaching us, educating us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, have a great day. Bye.